Hey, this is Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to talk about my favorite mechanisms in A War of Whispers. This is a game that came out in 2019 that I just played. What did I play? 3 players this last week, and I had a blast. If it was still in 2019, this would be one of my favorite games of the year because I had so much fun being mischievous and manipulating these armies in this game. Because in The War of Whispers, you kind of represent your own interests, and you don't control a faction on the board. There are all these different factions on the board, and you are manipulating them. You're pushing them into battle. You're adding more troops to them. Sometimes you're removing troops to the board. You're manipulating all these armies that don't represent you. Rather, you have these hidden interests that are randomly placed on your mat at the beginning of the game, indicating how many points you'll get if, for example, the Bear Clan finishes in control of different, what are they called, cities. If they for each city that they're in control of at the end of the game, you'll get 4 points. Then this clan, or this faction, however many cities they control, you get 3 points for each of those cities, and so on down to a -1. There's one that gives you -points for each city that faction controls. So there are some factions that you are really trying to help, and others that you are trying to drive to ruin through how you manipulate them. This is one of my favorite mechanisms of the game, that this is just randomly placed at the beginning of the game. Adds a lot of variability to the game, that this is just random. But there are times in the game where you can flip these tokens around and move them around. But when you do so, you expose them. In the photo I'm showing here, you see all these exposed. But really, this is the end of the game. During the game, these tokens are face down. I can look at them, but other players cannot. So they don't know what's important to me, even though I do. Unless I decide to flip them and then I reveal them and other players can see them. So that's a mechanism I really, really enjoy in this game. A couple other things that I really enjoy, though. One is this, I'll call it worker placement system, because it is worker placement related. It's a circular board, as you can see here. And as you take turns in the game, there are 2 types of turns. One is that you're placing workers on this outer rim, and then you, after all workers are placed each round, you activate them in a certain order depending on the board position. But a couple cool things happen here with the worker placement. One is, you can see this here. So this is the we'll call it red area of the board. This worker, so we're going in clockwise order. This worker first activates this space and then this space. So even though they aren't on this space, because no one else has gone here, they get this benefit. And then they get this benefit as well. Whereas this blue token only gets the benefit they're on because they're immediately blocked by this worker, or there is a worker in front of them somewhere. And even this last action space is really interesting too, because this last action space says, take this benefit and then move your token to another space. This is paired with another really cool element, which is that at the end of each round, you remove one of your workers from the board, but the other one stays there. And so this is a huge choice in the game. Which worker do you like the position of? Which faction are you ready to manipulate again? Or which one do you want to remove it from? And one of the really cool things that I found very early in this game is that you are not just manipulating and really aiding the factions that you were interested in. And so early on in the game, I was doing things with, I was choosing the yellow and red sections of the board because I was trying to manipulate those factions into ruin. I was trying to have them fight each other, or fight losing battles, or lose control, or I was trying to stash their armies in places that were so far away that other players couldn't get to them. So I love that you were equally invested in manipulating and activating areas or factions that you are interested in, that they're motivated to do well, as you are the factions that you want to do poorly. I really, really like that. It really added to this mischievous feeling in this game. I thought they did a fantastic job of that. Let's see if I'm missing anything else. I have a whole list of mechanisms that I liked in this game because I really, really enjoyed this game. Oh, yes, one of my favorite things in games is when good things happen when it's not even your turn. And this game is full of that because I may not be the only player who wants the blue faction to do well. This is randomly placed at the beginning of the game. So there might be other players who want blue and brown and green to do well. And so even when it's not my turn, even when I have no influence over the blue faction, there might be another player who is doing good things with the blue faction. So I'm engaged in that. I'm secretly smiling because I'm happy they're doing that. And also secretly a little bit worried because are they using the blue faction to fight against the brown faction? That's a problem. I want the brown faction to do well. Or are they using the blue faction to fight against the yellow or the red faction? That's great. I want them to do that. So there's a reason to still go and help out the factions that you want, even when other players are invested in them, because you don't know what those players are not invested in. What else? Oh, the asymmetry. I like that each of the factions, so the players themselves are not asymmetric, other than the random assortment of the tiles. There's no secret ability that or a special ability that my faction has, or that my house has. I was called the Cult of the Rat. So we didn't have any special abilities. However, so the asymmetry of the game comes down to each of the factions themselves. So I love that each of them actually has their own deck of cards. Their starting setup is a little different. Some of them control a lot of cities and start with few workers or few soldiers. Some of them are the opposite. So I love that there's a lot of asymmetry in this game, but it's within the shared context of the game itself. It's not asymmetric based on your individual house. I thought that was really great too. What is this? I have a note. Random arrangement of tokens paired with the abilities. Oh yeah, I already did that. The last thing that's really cool, and this is something I had to actively remind myself over the course of the game because I'm used to area control games where you're trying to control a certain area or just control the most land of other players. But midway through the game, I remembered that the total amount of land you control doesn't matter in this game. What matters is that you control cities at the end of the game. It's the cities that score these points. And so I think that is a really clever twist in this game, that you might have a faction that controls a huge amount of land, but they control one city. They have not done all that well in the game. Whereas you might have a faction that has really focused on conquering and controlling 3 different cities. And that's going to give them a lot of points, even though they have less land controlled. So I really like that touch, and I like the positioning of the cities too, because you kind of have to drive through other forces to get through those cities. Which cities do you target? In this case, I would want blue to target red cities because red is really weak for me. I wouldn't want blue to target the brown cities, and vice versa. I love that little twist related to specific spots on the board, not just general area control on the board. There's so much going on in this game. I really, really highly recommend it. If you want this feeling of controlling and manipulating the kingdom, it really, honestly, it feels like Game of Thrones. I wonder if they tried to get the Game of Thrones license and they just couldn't in the game, but it doesn't matter. If you want a game that feels like Game of Thrones without the IP, you can superimpose the IP onto this game as you play. I loved A War of Whispers. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if any of this reminds you of another game, if there's another game that makes you feel really mischievous as you're manipulating different things on the board, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that in the comments below. Thanks.